At my sister's house closing dinner, my mom looked at me and said, "You were never the child with real potential." I slid a notarized copy across the table and read the internship offer. My dad hid in his desk for 10 years. My brother stopped smiling first. And my mother never finished her sentence. Hey everyone, real quick before we start, I wanted to be upfront with you guys. Growth has been a little slower than we'd like, and subscribing is hands down the biggest thing that helps us keep this going. If you're enjoying the stories, we'd love to have you along for the ride. Thank you so much. You guys are the best. Now let's jump in. My mother raised her wine glass like she had been practicing in front of a mirror. 12 people at Hannah's new dining table. Candles, gold napkin rings, a salad course nobody had touched yet. Hannah was smiling at her neighbors. Marcus was laughing at something his wife said. Kyle, Hannah's husband, was refilling the water pitcher. The house still smelled like fresh paint and whatever Hannah had diffused to cover it. My mother stood up. "I just want to say something before we eat," she said. Her voice was warm, the voice she used for other people's children. "I am so proud of Hannah tonight. This house, this family she's building, and Marcus, of course, everything he's done at the firm." She turned her glass slightly toward me. Slightly. The way a lighthouse turns. "And David is here too." Which is lovely. David was never the child with real potential, but he has always been the one who shows up. A small laugh from somewhere down the table. Not a cruel one. Just the reflex laugh of someone who thinks they heard a joke. I didn't move. I counted. 1, 2, 3. Hannah's smile flickered. She looked at my mother, then at me, then back at my mother. 4, 5, 6. Marcus's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked at me the way you look at a tire that has just started to hiss. 7, 8. Aunt Patricia, at my right, set her fork down on her plate. Not loudly, but deliberately. 9, 10. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a manila envelope, notarized, sealed with a blue stamp. I slid it across the table. It stopped next to my mother's plate. "Before you finish that sentence," I said, "I want everyone to know what Dad did to me in 2015. The room went quiet the way a room goes quiet when a glass drops but doesn't break. 3 hours earlier, I had parked 2 blocks from Hannah's new house and sat in my car with the engine off. I was not nervous. I was something cleaner than nervous. I had been walking toward this dinner for 6 months, and really, for 10 years. Hannah had texted me twice that day. Once to remind me to bring wine. Once to ask if I could arrive a little early, because she wanted me to help her with the seating. You're good at that stuff. I had offered to help plan the dinner weeks ago. She said yes without suspecting anything, because the version of me she knew was the brother who always offered and never pushed. I arrived at 6. The house was as new as it looked online. 4 bedrooms, a pool she could not stop mentioning, a wine cellar she still called a wine room because she was unsure of the correct term. In the entryway, on a long white wall, she had hung 8 framed family photographs, and I stopped to look at them while she fussed with a centerpiece in the dining room. I wasn't in any of them. There was a picture of Marcus at his graduation, a picture of Hannah on her wedding day, a picture of my parents on some anniversary, probably the 30th. A picture of my father alone, in a suit, at what looked like an office event. One of Marcus and his wife. One of Hannah and Kyle on a beach. A group shot from a Thanksgiving 6 years ago that I remembered attending, cropped just above my shoulder, where my arm still rested on Hannah's. Just the arm. Disembodied. And one more, which I recognized from a different wall, in a different house. A photo of my parents in 1985, young, standing in front of a brick building I didn't know. My mother's coat was too big. My father had hair. They were both squinting at the camera. I had last seen that photograph 3 months ago, on the floor of my father's office, behind a desk drawer I had just pried open. I took my phone out and took a picture of Hannah's photo wall. Not because I needed it, just because I wanted to remember that she had moved that specific photograph to her own house. It meant something to her. It meant something to my mother. It would mean something later. Hannah called from the dining room. "David, can you come see if this centerpiece is too tall?" "I can't tell." I put my phone away. Coming, I said. The centerpiece was too tall. I moved it an inch shorter and told her it was perfect. She hugged me, thanked me, told me I was so helpful. She said it the way she says things to waiters. Seating charts are negotiations. Hannah didn't know that. She had put me at the far end of the table, arm next to a child's booster seat she had borrowed from a friend in case anyone brought a kid. Nobody had. I suggested that we move me one seat inward, so the booster doesn't look weird at the end. She agreed. That put me at the long side of the table. That put me directly across from my mother. That put Aunt Patricia on my right, where I could see her hands. I also moved the salt and pepper grinders from the center to between Marcus and Hannah. I told her it balanced the table visually. What it did was give me a clear sightline to Kyle's face. Kyle works in aerospace procurement. I had met him twice before, briefly, at weddings. I didn't know him well. I knew he would recognize a Lockheed letterhead. Rebecca, Hannah's new next-door neighbor, arrived at 6:40. Tall, 50s, widow. Her husband had died 2 years ago. Aunt Hannah had mentioned him once in passing, said he had worked in defense or something. Rebecca brought a bottle of something expensive. Hannah hugged her and introduced her to everyone by first name, including me. Rebecca, this is my brother David. David, Rebecca is the one I was telling you about. Nice to meet you, I said. Hannah mentioned you work in tech, Rebecca said. Is that right? Aerospace systems, I said. Sort of adjacent. Oh, lovely, she said, and was immediately pulled away by Hannah to see the wine room. I let that answer sit on the table between us like an empty plate. Aerospace systems. Adjacent. Nothing more. My mother arrived at 6:45, smelling like the same perfume she had worn since I was 10. She hugged Hannah. She hugged Marcus. She patted my shoulder twice, the way you might pat a dog you were being polite to at someone else's house. She did not ask me how I was. She never did at family events. She would ask later, in front of someone, because that was where the asking was useful. Patricia arrived last. She always does. She hugged Hannah, hugged Marcus, kissed the top of my mother's head, and then stopped at my chair. She put her hand on my shoulder, just for a second. You came, she said. I came. She looked at me for a beat too long. I didn't say anything. She sat down next to me and spread her napkin on her lap with the careful hands of someone who has been at a lot of tables where things went wrong. The first hour was the warm-up. My mother has a rhythm. She starts soft. She asks the guests she likes most about their children. She laughs at something her favorite child says, and she compliments the hostess. Then, somewhere between the appetizer and the main, she finds me. David, honey, she said, around 7:30. Are you eating enough? You look a little thin. I was not thin. I had gained 6 pounds this year on purpose. I'm fine, Mom. Because, if things are tight, we can always… I'm fine. It's just that you've always been a little hard to keep weight on. Marcus was the opposite, remember? We used to joke that he'd eat the whole fridge. Mom, I'm just saying, I worry. Marcus laughed. The warm, older brother laugh that sounded like nothing and meant something. Give him a break, Mom. He's doing great. Right, Dave? Doing great, Marcus. What is it you do again? Rebecca asked from across the table. She meant it kindly. She was new to the family. She didn't know the script. Aerospace, I said. He's in consulting, sort of, my mother answered for me. It's very technical. I don't really understand it. Oh, consulting. My late husband used to say half of consulting was the haircut. My mother laughed, too hard. Oh, Rebecca, that's terrible. Rebecca smiled politely. Kyle, at the head of the table, looked at me for half a second longer than he needed to, then looked at his plate. Patricia, on my right, picked up her water glass. Did not drink from it. Set it back down. What kind of aerospace? Rebecca tried again. Systems work, I said. It's pretty boring. My late husband was in defense. He used to say it was boring too. It wasn't. Dave doesn't really like to talk about work at family dinners, Marcus said. Right, Bud. I looked at him. Bud. Right, I said. He winked at me. The wink was the kind of thing you do when you believe you're handling something. When you believe the table belongs to you and you are choosing, generously, to let the other person keep their dignity. The toast came at 8. Hannah tapped her wine glass, said a few sweet words about the house, said she was so glad everyone could be there, said it meant everything to have all of us together, which was a lie because Dad was dead and we all knew it. My mother dabbed at her eye with a napkin and then took over the toast, which was the plan all along. I just want to say something before we eat. I watched her. I watched the way her hand held the glass. Not tight. Comfortable. She had been warming up to this sentence for months. I am so proud of Hannah tonight, this house, this family she's building, and Marcus, of course, on everything he's done at the firm. The tilt of the glass, the lighthouse turn. And David is here too, which is lovely. David was never the child with real potential, but he has always been the one who shows up. The laugh. Someone, down the table, reflex laughed. And the 10 seconds. I counted them because I had promised myself I would. I had promised myself I would let her have the room for 10 full seconds. If I moved too fast, she would say it was rehearsed. If I let the silence sit, she would dig into her own grave with her own mouth. On 10, I moved. The envelope made a soft sound when it hit the tablecloth. A paper sound, but heavy. Notarized documents weigh more than regular paper. They feel more serious in your hand. Before you finish that sentence, I said, I want everyone to know what Dad did to me in 2015. Silence. Hannah's mouth opened a little. Marcus put his fork down, carefully, like he had just noticed it was in his hand. My mother looked at the envelope. Her face did a very small, very fast thing. It was the face of someone who had recognized the size and shape of something she had not thought about in a long time. David, she said. Her voice was steady. What is this? Open it or I'll read it. She did not open it. So I did. I want to tell you about the drawer. 3 months ago, the day after my father's funeral, my mother gave me his desk keys. She was exhausted and she was performing exhaustion, both at the same time. She handed them to me and said, You always liked his things. Then she walked away. His desk was in the back of the house, in a room he called his study, even though it was really just a room with a desk and a framed college degree. I had been in that room maybe 5 times in my life. He didn't use it much, or I thought he didn't. The top drawer had 3 pens, a stapler, and a calculator from 1996. The middle drawer had bank statements, neatly paper-clipped, going back a decade. The bottom drawer was locked. I tried all the keys. The smallest one, a brass key I had never seen him use, turned cleanly. Inside the drawer were 2 things. A manila envelope addressed to me, care of my parents' old house, with a Lockheed Martin return address and a postmark from August 2015. And a framed photograph of my parents in 1985, face down. The envelope had been opened. You could see the flap had been resealed with clear tape. In one corner, on the inside of the flap, there was a small mark in red ink. I knew that mark. When I was 15, I had developed a habit of marking important mail with a tiny red dot, a dumb system I had made up to track things I cared about. My father had known about it. I had shown him once at 16 over breakfast, proud of myself for having a system. The mark on this envelope wasn't mine. It was his. He had copied it, which meant he had not only opened the envelope once, 10 years ago. He had opened it enough times to want to track it, to keep tabs on it. He had remembered my system. He had used my system. Against me. I held the envelope in my hands for a long time that day. Long enough that my legs started to hurt from kneeling on the hardwood. Then I slid out the letter inside. I read the first line aloud to the room. Lockheed Martin Corporation. August 14th. 2015. Dear Mr. David, I used my full name. We are pleased to extend you a formal offer of employment. Hannah made a small sound, not quite a word. Position: Associate Engineer, Aeronautics Division. Start date: September 21st, 2015. Base compensation. That can't be real, my mother said. I kept reading. Base compensation, $68,000 with relocation stipend and full benefits. This offer is contingent on completion of your degree program and a signed response by August 30th, 2015. David, that cannot be real, my mother said again, louder this time. Lockheed rejected you? Your father showed me the letter. I set the letter down on the table, gently, so the notary seal was facing up. He showed you a letter, I said. But not this one. Patricia beside me had not moved. But I could see her looking at the envelope. Looking at the handwriting on the front, where my father had written my name and an address from a decade ago. Across the table, my mother's composure was still mostly intact. She had trained for this without knowing she was training for it. That could be anyone's signature, she said. That could be forged. Anyone could print a letterhead in 2015, David. Anyone. It's notarized, I said. The whole document, chain of custody. I had it certified the week after Dad died. Notarization doesn't mean it's real. It just means you showed up to a notary. Notarization of the inside statement means a notary witnessed me write down where and when I found it, with the envelope, sealed, in her presence. Ask Dad's lawyer if you want a second opinion. I sent him a copy too. You sent... She stopped. I sent him a copy in March. He said he'd already been wondering. My mother looked like someone who had just stepped onto a floor she didn't remember was there. You are accusing your father, who is dead, of... I'm not accusing anyone yet. I'm reading a letter. Marcus leaned forward. His hands were folded. His smile was gone, but his face wasn't broken. He was doing the thing Marcus does when he's trying to manage a room. The firm voice thing. Okay, let's all just slow down here. David, you're upset. I'm not upset. And I get that, but this is Hannah's night and... I'm not upset, Marcus. He shut up. I looked at my mother. She was looking at the envelope. Her lips were pressed together. You said Lockheed rejected me, I said. You said it at Thanksgiving 2015. You said it at my cousin Will's wedding in 2017. You said it, I'm pretty sure, to Hannah's neighbor. Rebecca's head tilted, very slightly. You said it so many times, Mom, that I stopped correcting you. I stopped showing up. And one day, while I was driving home from a site visit, I realized that I didn't know what Dad told you happened. I only knew what you told everyone happened. Those are two different things. David, this is not the place. You picked the place. You just made a toast about me. There was a flashback in my head, uninvited. Me, 31 years old, sitting at my kitchen table 3 months ago, reading the Lockheed letter for the first time. Alone. My father had been buried 48 hours earlier. I remember the light in my kitchen. Afternoon, the letter in one hand. My other hand flat on the counter, pressing down like I was trying to hold the counter still. And I read it 3 times. The third time I read it out loud, to nobody, just to hear if it was real. I thought at one point about walking to the kitchen sink and lighting it on fire. I thought about it seriously for maybe 90 seconds. And then I thought about my mother's face, the last time she had told the story of my rejection, at Marcus's 40th birthday, and I put the letter back in the envelope. I drove to a notary the next morning. The notary was a woman in her 60s who worked out of a converted dental office. She asked me what I wanted notarized. I told her the signature, the document, and a statement from me about when and how I had found it. She looked at the letter. She didn't read it. She looked at the date. Is this document still valid? She asked. No, ma'am. Do you want to notarize the inside too? What does that mean? You write a statement. You swear to it. I notarize it. Then the envelope contains its own chain of custody. Nobody can argue later that you fabricated the chain. I did it. I wrote 2 paragraphs. I signed them. She stamped them. She tucked the statement into the envelope with the letter and sealed the whole thing with her own notary tape. She looked at me when she was done and said, "Somebody is going to be very sorry about this." "Yes, ma'am." "You doing all right?" "I'm getting there." She nodded. She didn't ask anything else. She charged me $42 and said, "Take care of yourself, honey." That's what was now sitting on Hannah's tablecloth. Not just a letter. An envelope that had testified to its own history before anyone at this table knew it existed. Your father, my mother was saying, would never. He did, though. You just heard me read his handwriting on the front. That envelope could have been sent back by Lockheed, returned to us because something was wrong with the application. Your father was protecting you from bad news. He was a protective man. I opened my jacket again, took out a second piece of paper, a certified mail slip printed on cheap pink carbon paper and signed at the bottom. Certified mail, I said. Signed for by Dad. August 17th, 2015. 3 days after Lockheed sent it. He didn't intercept a bounce back. He signed for it and he put it in his drawer. Marcus looked at the slip. He recognized the format. When he had handled enough certified mail at his own firm to know what one looked like and who signs for what. Patricia, beside me, picked up her water glass, drank from it. This time. My mother did not speak for several seconds. You were not ready, she said finally. Her voice was different now, not warm, thin. Ready? You were 22. You had never been away from home. We were trying to… Say that again for the table, please. Say that you and Dad decided I wasn't ready for a job I earned, and that you decided this without asking me. She did not say it again. Patricia put her water glass down and turned her body slightly, toward my mother, toward her sister. She said, "That's his handwriting, Ellen." It was the first thing Patricia had said all night. My mother looked at her. The look was complicated. There was anger in it. There was also something older than anger. Something like being caught by the one person you thought had stopped looking. Patricia, please. That's his handwriting on the front. I'm not saying anything else. I'm saying it's his handwriting. My mother closed her mouth. And then I reached for the photograph. I had brought it in a separate folder, inside the same jacket. I took it out now and set it on the table, face down. Nobody but me and Patricia could see what was on the back. I was going to leave it face down until the end. But my mother saw the shape of it, the thickness of it, the specific way the backing was cut. Her hand twitched. "Where did you get that?" she said. "Dad's desk. Behind it, there was this." I lifted the photograph, turned it over, and placed it face up on the tablecloth. My parents, 1985. I in front of the brick building. Then I lifted it again. I slid out a second piece of paper that had been tucked behind the backing, pressed flat against the photo for 10 years. It was a handwritten note. It was not in my father's handwriting. It was in my mother's. I read it. "Richard, please handle the Lockheed letter before David sees it. He doesn't need this right now. Marcus has a real chance at Hartman and Black, and we can't have David distracting from that by chasing something risky. Put it somewhere he won't look. We'll tell him it was a rejection. It's the kindest way. He'll forgive us eventually. Ellen." I set the note down next to the letter. Marcus was the one I was watching when I finished reading. His smile, which had been gone for 20 minutes, became something else. It became the smile of a man whose face is still holding its shape, but whose inside has collapsed. Hartman and Black. His first job. His launchpad. The firm that later became his entire professional identity. The connection that got him in the door was a favor my father had cultivated, and my father had only been able to cultivate it because his attention was not on helping me. Marcus understood in one moment. My career pipeline, his career pipeline, Mom's math. He was sitting in a chair whose legs had just been sawed off, and the chair hadn't fallen yet because nobody had told it to. His wife, next to him, touched his arm. He didn't react. He was looking at the note, at the handwriting, the kind of handwriting he had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists for 40-something years, on the handwriting of the person who had engineered his life without telling him. Hannah tried to take the room back. "Okay," she said, standing up a little, her hostess voice. "Okay, I think we've all heard enough. This is not the place. Kyle, can you help me bring out the…" "I'd like to hear the rest," Kyle said. Hannah stopped. He wasn't even looking at her when he said it. He was looking at the Lockheed letterhead on the table. He had been looking at it since I pulled it out. He had probably identified the VP signature line 20 minutes ago. "Kyle, please." "Hannah, I'd like to hear the rest." She sat down. Her hand went to her necklace. Her other hand reached for Kyle's forearm and didn't find it because he had moved it. My mother tried to stand. "I need to go lie down." "Sit," Patricia said. One word, quiet. My mother sat. Marcus tried one more move. His voice was controlled, just this side of desperate. "Okay, look. Even if all of this is real, we don't know Dad's reasoning. Lockheed has had issues. He could have been protecting David from a bad—" "The signature on the offer letter is Howard Linden," I said. Rebecca, across the table, made a small sound. I looked at her. "I'm sorry," she said. "Did you say Howard Linden?" "That's the name on the letter. My husband worked for him for almost 15 years. Howard retired 3 years ago." She looked at the letter. She looked at the date. "Howard wrote this letter. That's his signature. I've seen it on 1,000 Christmas cards." The room, for the second time tonight, went quiet. "David," Rebecca said, "do you work at Lockheed?" I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Once. And that was the one I had been waiting for. I hadn't announced it. I hadn't even said the name of the company when Rebecca asked me earlier what I did. I had said Aerospace Systems, adjacent. I had been at Lockheed for 3 years. Different division than Howard Linden had run. Lateral hire from another aerospace firm. Senior engineer, project lead on a satellite systems program. I had a project meeting next Tuesday. My office was on the 4th floor of a building 18 miles from my mother's house. My mother had been telling people for a decade that Lockheed rejected me. Rebecca's mouth had opened slightly. She was doing math in her head. The company that had rejected me in 2015, which she had heard about at 2 of Hannah's previous dinners, according to my mother, CU was the same company where her late husband had worked under the man whose signature was on the letter on the table. And the man reading that letter, who had nodded when asked if he worked there, was my mother's son, whose career she had just described publicly as having no real potential. Kyle had already put the pieces together. He said quietly, almost to himself, "Jesus." Marcus's face did a second thing. The first break had been the pipeline. The second break was this. His younger brother, the family failure, had quietly walked into the company his mother had sacrificed David's career to keep him out of. 3 years ago, without telling anyone. While Marcus was still networking toward a VP role at Hartman and Black, David had been doing real engineering at Lockheed, and none of them had known. His face went past collapse. It went into something flatter, like a page that has been read and set down. His wife whispered something to him. He didn't answer. My mother tried to speak. She opened her mouth. The first syllable came out. And then she saw the photograph, still face up, on the table. And she saw Patricia looking at it. And she saw that Patricia had recognized something. Patricia was looking at her own framing, her own composition. The photograph from 1985 had been taken by Patricia. She had been the one behind the camera at that brick building, on whatever day that was. Her sister and her brother-in-law, squinting at her lens, 41 years ago. Her framing. Her gift. Hidden inside her sister's sabotage for a decade. Patricia was not angry exactly. It was something deeper than angry. It was the face of someone who had just realized that she had been used, indirectly, as a hiding place. That her own eye, her own memory, her own small kindness from a Sunday in 1985 had been pressed into service against her nephew without her consent. My mother's first syllable stayed a syllable. She tried again. She couldn't get the second word out. She was looking at Patricia, and Patricia was looking at the photograph. And the sentence my mother had been about to say, whatever it was going to be, got stuck somewhere between her lungs and her throat. She closed her mouth. She did not finish her sentence. The dinner did not end in an explosion. It ended in drift. Rebecca stood first. She walked around the table, stopped at my chair and said, "It was nice to meet you, David. If you're ever at the campus, I hope you'll tell Howard hello for me." Then she said a soft goodnight to Hannah and let herself out the front door. I saw her take out her phone as she walked down the front path. I don't know who she was texting. Marcus's wife stood next. She helped him up. He didn't resist. They said nothing as they walked to the foyer. I watched Marcus put on his coat. His hands knew how to do it, but his eyes didn't seem to be tracking. His wife carried the coat for him to the car. The last thing he did at the door was turn his head and look at me. Not angry, not pleading. Just the look of a man who was going to spend the drive home doing math about the last 10 years of his life and not liking the answer. Hannah was crying quietly at the head of the table, not loudly. Just the kind of crying that happens when you realize you are the last one at your own event. Kyle sat next to her. He didn't reach for her hand. He was looking at the letter on the table. He was reading the date and the signature line again, the way an engineer rereads something. At one point, he picked up the certified mail slip and looked at the date on it. Then he put it back. He said, "To nobody. She's been telling people that story for 10 years. Hannah said, "Kyle." He didn't answer her. My mother sat where she was. She didn't stand. She didn't speak. Her wine glass was still in her hand. Her mouth was still the mouth of someone who had started a sentence. I stood up slowly. I gathered the letter, the certified mail slip, the note, and slid them back into the envelope. I put the envelope in my jacket. I left the photograph on the table. I turned to Patricia. Patricia picked up the photograph. She held it for a moment. She looked at her own framing. That was what she had recognized. The photograph had never been signed. Her signature was the composition itself. She slid the photograph into her purse. She did not speak. Neither did I. I walked to the door. Patricia followed me a moment later with her coat and her purse. We stepped out into the driveway. The cold was sharp and clean. Outside, she turned right toward her car. I turned left toward mine. Neither of us looked back. 3 hours later, Patricia was sitting at her kitchen counter with a cup of tea she hadn't started drinking. The photograph was face up next to her hand, on the counter. The brick building behind the young faces of the sister she had loved for 62 years and the brother-in-law she had liked well enough for 41 of them. Her phone was on the counter, face up. The screen was lit. It said Ellen. It rang 4 times. Then it rang again. Then again. On the 4th call, Patricia reached over and turned the phone face down. She did not say anything. She didn't have to. At my apartment across town, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I had one unread email from a colleague at Lockheed about a project review on Tuesday morning. I read it. I typed a 2-line reply. Sent it. Closed the laptop. I stood up. I looked at my jacket on the chair. The envelope was still in the inside pocket. I turned off the kitchen light. The apartment was quiet. My phone was on the counter. It had been ringing, intermittently for about an hour. I had not looked at it. I didn't look at it now either. I went to bed. On the counter, the phone stopped ringing. Outside my window, the city did what cities do at midnight. It kept going.